You can't block me here. This is outrageous.
Marcus, please, let's not escalate.
Sir, you must turn back now. No entry.
He thought he was coming home. A luxury car, a smiling mistress, a man certain he owned everything. The house, the business, the life he believed untouchable. But in front of his own gate, four guards stood still. In one sentence, shattered his world. You're not allowed inside. In that instant, arrogance crumbled. A man who controlled everyone became powerless. A loyal wife became a silent storm. A lie built over years began to collapse for all to see. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about patience, strength, and a woman who chose truth over vengeance. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe now for more gripping, emotional stories where justice always finds its way home. Blue Heart. Marcus stepped out of the black luxury SUV like a man returning to a kingdom he believed he owned. The vacation had been flawless. Private beaches, champagne mornings, stolen laughs with Sienna under foreign sunsets. She clung to his arm now, sunglasses still on, confidence borrowed from his. In Marcus's mind, life was perfectly balanced. A successful business back home, a loyal wife waiting quietly, and a mistress who made him feel powerful again. Power was his favorite illusion. He adjusted his watch, gold, heavy, expensive, just as the compound gates came into view. This house wasn't just a home. It was a symbol, built with his money, protected by his guards, paid for by years of deals, dominance, and decisions made without apology. Marcus smiled. Kings return like this. But the gates didn't open. Instead, two guards stepped forward. Their posture was stiff, unfamiliar. One of them raised a hand. "Sir, you can't enter." The words landed wrong, like a joke told at a funeral. Marcus laughed once. "Move. I've just returned." The guard didn't flinch. "We have instructions." "Instructions? From whom?" Sienna shifted beside him, confused now. "Marcus, what's happening?" His smile thinned. Annoyance replaced ease. He pulled out his phone, waved his car keys, gestured toward the mansion behind the walls. "This is my house," he said sharply. "My name is on everything." The guard met his eyes. Calm, unmoved. "Not anymore, sir." Silence filled the driveway. Heavy, humiliating. In that moment, something invisible cracked. Not the gate. Not the guards. Marcus's certainty. How could a man who owned everything be locked out of his own life? How could power disappear without warning? As the gates remained closed, Marcus felt it for the first time. The truth he'd been running from. The perfect life he believed he controlled was built on a lie, and that lie was about to collapse. For months, Amara had watched her marriage from a distance that only silence can create. She noticed everything. The late-night calls Marcus took on the balcony, his voice lowered but careless. The business trips that came with unfamiliar cologne on his shirts. The way his affection returned in rehearsed gestures, flowers without warmth, apologies without questions. He thought consistency made his lies believable. Amara knew better. She never raised her voice, never checked his phone in front of him, never asked, "Were you really?" That kind of confrontation, she understood, only teaches liars how to lie better. So she waited. From the outside, she looked like the perfect, obedient wife, calm, composed, almost invisible. Staff members assumed she didn't notice. Friends pitied her quietness. Even Marcus mistook her restraint for fear. But silence isn't empty. It listens. Every document Marcus tossed aside, Amara read. Every contract he signed in arrogance, she examined. She remembered the early years, when Marcus had ideas but no capital, ambition but no discipline. Back then, it was her inheritance that stabilized the business. Her legal expertise that structured it. Her name that secured the first loan when banks didn't trust his temper. Over time, Marcus began to believe success had rewritten history. It hadn't. Legally, the house belonged to Amara. Not because she had taken it, but because it had always been hers. The business, too, was registered under a holding company she controlled, a decision Marcus himself had approved years earlier, distracted and confident, calling paperwork women's worries. She never corrected him. Instead, she prepared. Amara knew about Sienna, knew her name before Marcus ever said it aloud, knew the dates of the vacations, the hotels, the receipts quietly charged to accounts he assumed were unmonitored. She knew because she had stopped trusting words and started trusting patterns. And patterns never lie. What hurt her wasn't the betrayal itself. It was Marcus's certainty that he would never face consequences. That belief sat heavier than infidelity. It told her exactly who he had become. So Amara planned without anger. She spoke to lawyers without drama, accountants without accusation, security firms without explanation. Each step was clean, quiet, legal. There would be no shouting matches, no scenes that allowed Marcus to paint himself as the victim. When everything was in place, she did something radical. She stopped waiting. The instructions were simple. If Marcus returned with anyone who wasn't his wife, he was not to be allowed inside. No confrontation, no messages, just closed gates. Now, from the upper floor of the house, Amara stood by the window as Marcus argued below. His voice carried faintly through the glass, sharp, entitled, confused. She saw the woman beside him shift nervously, her confidence draining with every second the gates stayed shut. Amara didn't smile. She didn't cry either. What she felt was steadiness. For the first time in years, she wasn't reacting. She was choosing. Marcus looked small from up there, not because he lacked money or strength, but because his power had always depended on being unquestioned. And today, he was being denied without explanation. That was the moment the balance shifted. Power doesn't always announce itself with noise. Sometimes it simply refuses to open the door. Amara turned away from the window and walked toward the study, the room Marcus rarely entered because it bored him. Inside were files, deeds, legal copies, and a future he hadn't bothered to understand. She sat at the desk and placed her hands flat against the surface, grounding herself. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. For too long, she had allowed Marcus to believe her patience was permission, that her loyalty meant ownership, that love meant surrender. He was wrong. Silence had never meant submission. It had meant strategy. Outside, Marcus's voice rose again, demanding answers. Inside, Amara breathed calmly, already several steps ahead. She knew what came next. She knew the questions he would ask, the anger he would unleash, the disbelief that would follow. And she was ready, because the truth was simple and devastating. Marcus hadn't lost everything in one moment. He'd been losing it slowly, the day he mistook a quiet woman for a powerless one. The gates didn't open, but the silence broke. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the unfamiliar sound of raised voices in a place where wealth usually bought quiet. Curtains shifted, phones lifted discreetly. In communities like this, nothing spread faster than disruption. Marcus paced the driveway, fury replacing confusion. His voice echoed now, sharp and unfiltered. "This is ridiculous," he shouted at the guards. "You know who I am." That was when Amara stepped outside. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She walked with the calm of someone who had already accepted the outcome. Dressed simply, no jewelry, no performance, just presence. The murmurs grew louder as heads turned toward her. Marcus froze. For a moment, relief flickered across his face. "Amara," he said, lowering his voice, trying to regain control. "Tell them to open the gate. This is a misunderstanding." She stopped a few feet away from him. Between them stood distance, history, and truth. "There's no misunderstanding," Amara replied evenly. Sienna looked between them, confusion tightening her features. "Marcus, who is this?" Amara didn't look at Sienna. Her eyes stayed on Marcus. "Tell her," she said softly. Marcus laughed, a hollow, forced sound. "Don't do this here. We'll talk inside." "There is no inside for you anymore," Amara said, loud enough now for the nearest neighbors to hear. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Marcus's face darkened. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," Amara corrected him. "I'm ending a performance." She turned slightly, addressing not just Marcus, but everyone listening. For years, this man introduced himself as the owner of this house, the architect of a business empire, a devoted husband working endlessly for his family. Her gaze returned to Marcus. That was the lie. Sienna stepped back instinctively. Marcus, what is she talking about? Amara finally looked at her. There was no anger in her eyes, only clarity. He told you he was free, didn't he? Separated. Trapped in a loveless marriage. Sienna swallowed. He said the divorce was coming. Amara nodded once. That's what he tells all of them. The word all hung in the air like smoke. Marcus snapped. Enough, he shouted. You're trying to humiliate me. You did that yourself, Amara replied. I'm just removing the cover. She reached into her folder and held up a document. This house, legally mine, purchased under my name, maintained with my funds. The business you brag about. Another page. Registered under a holding company I control. You've been an employee in your own fantasy. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Marcus lunged forward. You're lying. Amara didn't flinch. Then why did you forge invoices? She asked calmly. Why did you move money into personal accounts under fake vendor names? Why did you think no one would notice? The color drained from Marcus's face. Sienna's voice shook. Marcus, is that true? He turned on her. You don't understand. Oh, she understands, Amara interrupted, just like the others did. Eventually, she listed them without cruelty. Names, dates, trips disguised as conferences, gifts purchased with company money. Each detail landed like a quiet strike, precise, undeniable. Marcus's control unraveled. You went through my things, he roared. You spied on me. No, Amara said. I audited you. That word hit harder than any insult. She took one step closer, not threatening, not emotional, just final. You stole from the business. You lied to investors. You used marital trust as cover for fraud. And you assumed my silence meant ignorance. Marcus laughed wildly now, desperation cracking through. You think this ends me? I'll fight you. I'll destroy you. Amara's voice dropped, steady as stone. I already reported everything. The crowd went silent. Authorities, tax offices, board members, she continued. That's why the accounts are frozen. That's why the guards answer to me. That's why the gate will never open for you again. Sienna took another step back, horror replacing infatuation. You told me she was nothing, she whispered, that you owned everything. Amara met her gaze gently. He needed you to believe that, because if you saw the truth, you wouldn't have stayed. Tears welled in Sienna's eyes, not for Marcus, but for herself. Marcus shouted, cursed, demanded, pleaded, cycling through every weapon he had ever used to control a room. None of them worked. Amara didn't raise her voice. She didn't repeat herself. She simply waited while the truth did what it always does when given space. It stood. Neighbors watched as the man who once dominated every conversation shrank under his own exposure. Phones recorded. Whispers solidified into judgment. Reputation, carefully curated for years, collapsed in real time. Finally, Marcus slumped. You planned this, he muttered. Yes, Amara said, because accountability doesn't happen by accident. She turned to the guards. Please escort Mr. Marcus and his guest off the property. The word guest cut deep. As Marcus was led away, he looked back one last time, searching for hesitation, regret, weakness. He found none. Amara stood tall, not victorious, but complete. Because the greatest humiliation Marcus faced that day wasn't public exposure. It was realizing that the woman he underestimated had been awake the whole time, watching, preparing, and waiting for the truth to finally speak for itself. The sirens arrived softly at first, distant, almost respectful, then grew louder as they turned into the compound. Blue and red lights washed over the pristine walls, the manicured hedges, the gathered neighbors who now stood openly watching, no longer pretending privacy mattered. Marcus stiffened. For the first time since Amara had stepped outside, real fear crossed his face. 2 police vehicles stopped near the gate. Officers stepped out, calm and deliberate, carrying folders instead of urgency. This wasn't chaos. This was procedure. One of them approached Amara. Mrs. Ramon? Yes, she replied. We have everything you submitted. Thank you for your cooperation. Marcus spun toward her. You call the police? He barked. You're trying to destroy me. Amara met his gaze evenly. No, Marcus. I reported crimes. The law is doing the rest. An officer turned to Marcus. Sir, please place your hands where I can see them. Marcus laughed again, sharp and disbelieving. This is insane. I'm a victim here. She's manipulating all of you. The officer didn't react. He simply opened the folder. Marcus Hale, he read aloud. You are under investigation for multiple counts of financial fraud, theft through falsified invoices, forgery of corporate documents, tax evasion, and assault. The word assault cut through the air. Marcus's head snapped up. Assault? That's a lie. Amara spoke quietly. Ask him about the night. He shoved me into the study door. The medical report is included. The officer nodded, flipping another page. It is. The crowd murmured. Phones tilted closer. Neighbors who once greeted Marcus with admiration now watched him like a stranger. Marcus's voice wavered. Amara, listen. This has gone too far. You went too far, she said. I just stopped protecting you. As officers moved closer, Marcus's panic escalated. I can explain everything, he pleaded. The money, it was temporary. The invoices, I was fixing cash flow. Everyone does it. No, the officer replied calmly. They don't. Marcus was handcuffed. The metallic click echoed louder than the sirens. Sienna covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know. Amara looked at her gently. I believe you. That kindness broke something in Sienna. She stepped back completely, no longer beside Marcus, no longer defending him. But the truth wasn't finished yet. Another officer approached with a second file, thicker, heavier. There's more. Marcus's shoulders slumped. What now? An investigation linked to a property registered under an alias, the officer continued. Another residence. Another woman. The neighbors gasped. Marcus shook his head violently. No, that's not. 2 children, the officer said. Both minors. The words landed like a final blow. Sienna stumbled backward, as if struck. Children, she cried. You said you never wanted any. Amara closed her eyes briefly, not in pain, but in release. I suspected, she said quietly. But suspicion isn't proof. Now, there is. Marcus began shouting. At the officers, at Amara, at the crowd, stories tumbling over one another, contradictions stacking high. He accused Amara of forging evidence, of bribing officials, of ruining him out of spite. The officer listened patiently. Then he turned another page. Your attempt to frame Mrs. Ramon was documented, he said. Emails sent from your device. Financial transfers traced back to accounts you control. Even a lawyer you hired cooperated once confronted with evidence. Marcus sagged. Every move he had made to escape consequences had already been anticipated. Every trap he'd set had been dismantled before it could close. Amara watched him, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. This was who Marcus truly was when stripped of charm and control. Loud, desperate, exposed. You always thought you were smarter than everyone, she said softly. That rules were for weaker people. Marcus looked at her now, eyes red, voice cracking. You loved me. I did, Amara replied. That's why I gave you every chance to stop. The officers began escorting him toward the vehicle. The neighbors parted instinctively, creating a path of judgment and disbelief. Marcus turned one last time, rage flaring weakly. You think you've won? Amara shook her head. This isn't a game. The car door closed. Silence followed, deep, cleansing silence. The sirens faded as the vehicles pulled away, taking Marcus with them. The man who once controlled rooms with a glance now sat powerless in the back seat, hands cuffed, future uncertain. Amara stood still, letting the moment pass through her without clinging to it. Justice doesn't always feel loud. Sometimes it feels like gravity, inevitable once everything false has collapsed. Neighbors slowly dispersed, whispers turning into certainty. The compound gates closed again, this time not as a barrier, but as a boundary restored. Sienna approached hesitantly. I'm sorry, she said. For everything. Amara nodded. So am I. For all of us. She turned back toward the house, not as Marcus's wife, not as anyone's shadow, but as herself. Behind her lay the ruins of manipulation, control, and lies. Ahead of her stood something unfamiliar. Peace. Because the greatest punishment for a manipulator isn't prison or shame. It's this: to lose the power to rewrite reality, to face a world that finally sees clearly, and to realize, too late, that the one person they underestimated was the one who held everything together. In the days after Marcus was taken away, the house felt different, not emptier but lighter. Amara noticed it in small ways. The way sunlight lingered longer in the hallways. The way her breath no longer tightened when a phone rang. Silence returned again, but this time it wasn't defensive. It was peaceful. Sienna came back once. Not to argue, not to demand anything. She stood at the gate alone, eyes tired, confidence stripped of illusion. When the guard called Amara, she paused for a moment, then said, "Let her in." Sienna's voice broke before she could finish her first sentence. "I didn't know," she said again, as if repetition could erase guilt. "He told me I was the only one, that you were cold, that the marriage was already over." Amara listened. She didn't interrupt. When Sienna finished, Amara spoke gently. "Men like Marcus survive because women are kept apart, ashamed, silent, blaming themselves instead of the lie." Tears slid down Sienna's face. "I hate myself for believing him." "Don't," Amara replied. "Hate the system that trained you to doubt your instincts instead." That was the beginning. One by one, the other women came forward. Not all in person, some through lawyers, some through letters, but each carried pieces of the same story. Promises made in secret. Futures offered temporarily. Truth delayed intentionally. Together, those fragments formed something undeniable. Strength. They cooperated with investigators, filling in gaps Amara alone couldn't reach. Timelines sharpened. Patterns emerged. What Marcus had once controlled through isolation now collapsed through connection. The case grew solid, unmovable. Marcus faced trial without allies left to manipulate. Evidence spoke where charm once worked. The sentence, when it came, was heavy but fair. Prison walls replaced boardrooms. Schedules replaced dominance. For the first time in his life, Marcus couldn't talk his way out of consequence. And for the first time, the women could move forward. Under Amara's leadership, the business didn't just survive, it thrived. She restructured with transparency, promoted people Marcus had overlooked, rebuilt trust with investors by telling the truth plainly, without performance. Employees noticed the difference immediately. Meetings became calmer, decisions clearer. The culture shifted from fear to respect. Success followed naturally. But Amara never used Marcus's downfall as a banner. She didn't celebrate his ruin. She didn't speak his name unless necessary. Victory, to her, wasn't about watching someone fall. It was about standing without needing to push. Sienna found work again, this time without lies attached. One of the other women returned to school. Another reunited with her family. Healing didn't arrive all at once, but it arrived honestly. They stayed in touch, not as victims bonded by trauma, but as women who refused to let betrayal define them. On a quiet evening, Amara stood on the same balcony where Marcus once took his secret calls. The city lights blinked below, distant and indifferent. She thought about the woman she had been, patient to the point of erasure, and the woman she was now. Still calm, still quiet, but no longer invisible. There had been no revenge, no screaming matches, no public triumph speech, just dignity. Because true victory isn't loud. It doesn't demand applause. It doesn't require cruelty in return. True victory looks like women choosing unity over rivalry, truth over comfort, self-respect over fear. Marcus lost everything because he tried to control too much. They gained everything because they chose to stand together. And that was the ending no lie could survive. Marcus believed power came from money, fear, and control. From loud voices, closed fists, and people too afraid to question him. But real power was never loud. It was quiet. It observed. It waited. And when the moment arrived, it stood firm. Amara never screamed to be heard. She never begged to be chosen. She never destroyed herself in the name of revenge. Instead, she chose truth when lies felt easier. She chose growth when bitterness felt tempting. She chose herself when staying silent would have been safer. Because real power isn't about who you dominate. It's about who you become after betrayal tries to break you. It's about dignity without cruelty, justice without hatred, strength without noise. Marcus lost control because it was never truly his to begin with. Amara gained freedom because she had always carried it within her. If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe for more emotional stories, where truth always wins in the end blue art.